Hands down, the Raimi trilogy has definitely got to be one of the best superhero movies ever made, and also one of the best movies of all time, because this franchise is definitely the most amazing superhero movies ever made. A superhero film that has the superhero stuff in it, the science fiction stuff in it. It also has some amount of film as well. There is emotion, character arc, the loss of a member, and there's progression, there's motivations. There's too much to actually express in this one video. I'm actually falling short of words. Sam Raimi, who was essentially known for the Evil Dead trilogy from 1981 to 1991, that definitely was one of his finest works, but none of the people who are actually the Evil Dead fans would have ever realized that Spider-Man, the trilogy, would be such a huge hit, and it would be so successful at the box office that even after 16 years, or let's say 20 years ever since the release of that first movie, I'd be making a video on that. I essentially grew up with this iteration of Spider-Man. That's the reason, no matter how many iterations and no matter how many movies later, I always come back to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man to look at how marvelous his movie was. Because that movie essentially gave us a huge moral boost and huge character boost. Each time I felt low, each time I felt something, not clicking well in life. The Raimi trilogy essentially begins with Tobey Maguire's character getting bitten by this radioactive spider who essentially gives him all kinds of superhuman abilities, and then he's forced to confront with Green Goblin, and after a brutal battle he essentially ends up killing his nemesis. And then again the iconic quote comes up which says, with great power comes great responsibility. That is something most of the YouTubers need to have these days. Believe me, that's not an opinion, that's a fact. Spider-Man 2, on the other hand, continues the very same story of how Peter Parker essentially accepted his superhero identity, and now he's trying to juggle between his superhero self, his real self, and his romance for Mary Jane. James Franco's character has essentially taken over his father's company, and now he's planning to build this new technology whereby they'll be using the sun's energy to create some sort of replaceable electricity form. But again, the experiment goes haywire, and then you have the birth of Dr. Octavius, who essentially turns out to be a villain who is a tragic one. Not exactly a villain by choice, but a villain by circumstances. That particular movie has to be one of the best movies in the entire franchise. Believe me, it is also one of the best superhero movies ever made till date. Spider-Man 3 is a pretty debatable movie in my opinion. The reason why I say so is because Bully Maguire character did not age that well, but right now it's a huge meme sensation, a huge internet sensation. So hands down, I really believe that Spider-Man 3 is far more underrated than the people actually give it credit for. That's the reason why the movie never really worked that kind of magic at the box office back then. Sure, it was a huge hit, but never did we ever see the Spider-Man franchise actually taking forward after that. You could probably blame the studio's interference as well. So many villains essentially being crammed into one single movie, so many plot points being crammed into one single movie that don't exactly take the narrative anywhere. That's the reason why Spider-Man 3 probably happens to be the least favorite in many people's lists. When I even conducted a poll on my channel stating about how the Spider-Man movies fare up, many people actually voted the first one to be the best kind of all. Anyway, that's your personal opinion anyway. The Spider-Man trilogy is probably one of the best superhero movies ever made. It has character, it has emotion, it has character arcs, it has brilliant writing, it has some really quotable dialogues. It is definitely, one of the most good looking movies of its own time. Sure, it's a product of its time, and sometimes, things do age as the years go by, and sure, this movie has aged as well. But yet, even after looking at this movie for almost 2 decades now, this movie still does not look old to me. It still looks like one of the most entertaining films to have ever come on the silver screen, and it always will be. No matter how many iterations of Spider-Man they create, no matter how many actors play the lead character, Tobey Maguire will probably always be irreplaceable as Spider-Man. His Spider-Man was perhaps one of the best ones in the entire, franchise or in the entire history of Marvel movies. I remember watching this movie as a kid when I was around 8 or 9 years old, or even before than that, and ever since I've been watching this movie multiple times. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get my hands on a DVD copy because, of course, in India we don't get that stuff very quickly, and it's really expensive to get them. Most of the time the costs are just way too high. But anyway, enough about the DVD babble. I'll get back to my point of why do I love the Spider-Man trilogy so much. The Raimi trilogy is essentially the embodiment of Sam Raimi's best work. Even his next superhero venture, that is Doctor Strange 2 in the Multiverse of Madness, was a huge sham. Believe me, that movie was probably one of the worst MCU movies I ever heard of. But Thanks to the MCU virus these days, it's like a cult. Everybody who hears the name of an MCU movie, they just rush to watch it because apparently they feel it's cool. It's sad to see that even 28-year-old kids have an opinion like a 13-year-old child. I mean, you're supposed to watch movies like The Godfather, you're supposed to watch movies that are more mature and at least have a story to tell. That's where the Raimi trilogy succeeds a lot, because it has a story to tell, it has a lot of, plot points to elaborate upon, it is very accurate to the comics in many ways. Sure, MJ's character is something that is pretty debatable in my opinion, and apart from that, you also have the character of James Franco, that is Harry, who essentially turns out to be the scapegoat in all the three movies, because everybody in the movie is like, don't tell Harry, don't tell Harry, don't tell Harry. That's the reason I feel Harry is perhaps the most betrayed character in the entire franchise. He's definitely the most betrayed persona in the whole franchise. A guy who lost his father because of Spider-Man, who essentially happens to be his friend. He then plots revenge against his friend and then realizes that it was his father who was responsible for his own death, and all this while he was having a beef against his best friend. He essentially, gets all that beef corrected and passes away with dignity in Spider-Man 3. Of course, one of the most emotional moments of that film anyway. This is my entire wrapping up of the Raimi trilogy. I feel it is still one of the best superhero trilogies to ever exist. Well, tell me down in the comment section about what do you feel about this particular trilogy and how have your memories been with the Spider-Man films. I perhaps feel that the Spider-Man movies will always be the best kind of superhero movies around, no matter how many actors they bring in. Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and even those animated movies. Tobey Maguire Spider-Man by default has to be the most resonating Spider-Man film ever. It has got everything that you need. The premise has aged a bit, but yet I can still feel the power of the words on my body. That is, with great power comes great responsibility. Do remember these lines, and these are very important lines for everybody who actually is looking for a good moral lesson someday. Well, this is the entire video, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to watch more Fast and Furious content or Spider-Man content or any kind of movies that you want me to talk about. Till that time, guys, stay safe, bye bye, take care. Please keep buying physical media, because that's the best way to protect and preserve movies for very long. Stay safe, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, drive safe and do whatever it is that you want to do it, but make sure you don't hurt anybody around. Till that time, guys, bye con Dios.